Greetings and welcome back to the Department of Tangents podcast. We are turning 80 today with this episode featuring an interview with writer, puppet creator, producer, and all-around problem solver Bill Diamond, whom I interviewed live back in November at the Northeast Comic-Con and Collectible Extravaganza, which is happening again next week out in Boxboro, Massachusetts. Diamond had a wonderful room full of puppets, from a giant Audrey II used in stage productions of Little Shop of Horrors, to a Vincent Price puppet, to his own creation, the Moonshins, which he is resurrecting as a television series in the near future. Diamond worked with Jim Henson early in his career, but he always wanted to run his own shop. So he did. He's head of Bill Diamond Productions, which does everything from Diamond's own shows to windshield wiper commercials. We get into the nuts and bolts of that in front of a live audience at the con. Diamond faces a new challenge every day at work, which is how he likes it. He says you could never pin him down to doing the same job forever. And stay tuned after the conversation for new music from Teardrop City off of their album It's Later Than You Think. More on them later. This is the first Department of Tangents episode in a couple of months, and for those of you who have been looking forward to new stuff and wondering what happened, I had a hell of a couple of months. I've been recovering from an illness that put me in the hospital twice, and it took a lot of energy to get through it, and I decided the forced break might be a good thing, so I spent that time gathering more interviews and music and comedy and book excerpts for the featured track. So thanks to everybody for listening. I appreciate the support. And now, the Department of Tangents podcast, episode 80, an interview with Bill Diamond and music from Teardrop City. I wanted to just run down your resume a little bit at the start to just prepare. And this is a woefully incomplete version of your resume. I'd say you're probably best known for your work as a puppeteer with Jim Henson. Would you say that's...
Well, I wasn't really a puppeteer for Jim Henson.
Or with...
I'm best known as being from the stuff I have developed.
The stuff you developed
right.
with Jim Henson, the work with Jim Henson. But you've also been a child actor. You won Emmys for light direction for the Yankees Yes Network. You run your own production studio. And you also have the most wonderful room here full of so many, I don't know if you guys have been into to that room, but there are so many wonderful things in that room. What would you say is your job title, given all of these things? What would you say when somebody asks you, what do you do? What do you tell them?
I probably more as a producer, creator, producer, that type of thing. Because I wear so many different hats on a regular basis that they're all black.
Why are they all black? What's the...
Yeah, they have my name on them, so it works.
Okay. So where did you start? What was the first thing that you did in the industry?
Well, it was funny. When I was a kid, I used to get stuck on VO5 commercials.
I was going to ask what commercials were.
I mean, really, a kid. I did some local stuff, but then I dabbled with acting. I wound up doing. I was in the Oliver Fagin gang for a whole new production of Oliver, and then when they lost Oliver, I wound up being Oliver. So that kind of helped. It gave me a little idea of stage. But I had so many interests from all the production side. That was really, and television was a primary interest of mine. And then when I was about 14, I decided in school that I wanted to do animation, and so I put together a stop-motion animation, which I won my first award in New York State for. Mm-hmm. And so I thought at 14 I had a good shot at it.
14 stop-motion, and that's in an age where you couldn't just go on YouTube and see how this was done. How did you
Nobody
learn
even knew what a YouTube was. Well, fortunately, I got to know... I got to meet Ray Harryhausen, who, everyone knows who that is in the stop-motion world. And I had an interest in, all the arts. So I really, at that point, felt that the best thing for me to do was really be interested, not only from the performance side, but from the production side. So production was really my primary interest, not just the puppets or the performance or whatever. Puppets came later. Mm-hmm. The art was really to design performances. And I, in high school, I had my own theater company, which was called the Pandemonium Theater Company. So I was a rival to the high school theater company.
How did that work? Did you use their facilities?
I actually used the middle school. So I was like, I tried out for their play, didn't make it, so I mounted my own. And I went right against them, and I did Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. We were far more popular than My Fair Lady.
How did you even produce that? Was there a script that you?
There was a script, so we pulled it together. So I rivaled the schools. When they said I couldn't do something, I said, well, see you later. And so we mounted our own theater, created the whole thing, and I did that. And I had a whole crew at that point. So I was pretty much pulling people for theater and television at that time, which I still do today. Pull all my crew into doing something.
Do you meet old rivals on Facebook and hash it out that you were in Abbott and Costello versus Frankenstein and they were in whatever other production was that?
No, but they remember the Abbott and Costello stuff, and Marx Brothers I did too. So, and I was into all the classic movie stuff. So it's a jumbled mix, and I just was so interested in all of it, from theater to TV. My mentor, Mel Gottesfeld, who remembers, as he puts it, this 14-year-old came up to me because he ran Bosie's television studio that he was just building, and said, he walked in here and said, I want to borrow one of your cameras. Which is, he'll tell that story. I'm just repeating him, and then I did, and I made a film, won an award, and I said, there you go. Next. So
you make it sound like it's been easy. It couldn't have been easy to get where.
Well, none of it's easy. It's just, I guess it was just driving, and that's the same thing. So if I set out to do something, then we're doing it. So the people around me pretty much know that at that point, we're on to the next. But I have a great crew. I've always had a great crew. And, different people have come and go, but they've always had that foundation. So that's what makes it work.
Well, how did you get interested in production? Was it something you saw as an actor? You got to see behind the scenes and thought, this is where I want to be?
Well, I was interested in live shows, but I also was interested in television. So, like I said, that I had met Mel and a man named Joe Cipollone, who really taught me the ropes of TV. And I took Mel's course. And at that point, I wound up being his assistant teacher later on. So, I got into that. And with Joe, I was doing a lot of stuff and this was in my teens and 20s. I was already into doing stuff with him. He had worked for NBC. He was an engineer. He worked for NBC and Reeves Teletape. And Reeves Teletape led me to Sesame Street. Because they were the production company of Sesame Street at that time. And so I had worked really in what they call video ops at that point, and I had was interested in puppetry, and I had met Carol Spinney before I met Jim. And I was doing Sesame Street at the same time I was doing stuff at NBC and CBS, just working the gamut.
You were 19 when you started there, right?
Yeah.
Right. What was it like being a 19-year-old working
with all these people?
Yeah,
I was just runaway train, so it really didn't matter. Age was not even an issue at that point. Still isn't. So there, I just loved the production side so much, and that's really was my primary interest. I had worked with a series of artists in Portchester, New York, and that was with a man named John Kahn and a young man named Johnny. And John Kahn was quite an incredible artist, and I was already doing live shows and puppets and TV at that point. But we were doing these really interesting sculptures and working with wood and a number of things. And at that point, this was like 79. So I was pretty established with my own studio since 75. And producing live shows and finding new ways, working for stuff for IBM. And this young man was doing some video work with me, and we were doing all this circus and sculpting work. And, I got to know Johnny really well. And John Kahn I was working with, we were the same age, but Johnny really wanted to know television and was really quite a craftsman. And, we went to do this event with a number of circus performers. One was Michael Motion. And Johnny said, well, my father's going to be here tonight. Do you mind meeting him? And I remember us being up on this loft videotaping, and Johnny was up there, and his father happened to be Jim Henson. So Jim walked in, and he said, thanks for helping me, mentoring my son, whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And he said, why don't you come see me in New York? So I went down with John. So John and I had a very strong relationship, and I got to know his mom and his family on that side. And then Jim asked me to do some work for him, strictly in the television business. At that time, Jim was just starting to do a film. He was way into doing the development of Dark Crystal at that point.
What were your day-to-day activities like working early on?
Took the train in the morning. Train back now.
I've had those interviews before.
Yeah.
It was like 8 hours.
I wasn't there day to day. I was really pretty much still doing my own thing. I came in to help. I came in and did this, and I did some work for Jim. But that I was fascinated by it, but I really wasn't. I was very interested. I had my own studio at that point. I was really driving to do my own thing. I had a comic strip in the local paper, which was Land of the Moonshins, and I was putting out videos all over the place. And cable was a new thing, so I was at the beginning of that market.
Oh, right, yeah. And you don't think of the beginning of cable.
No, and I was also at the beginning of malls. so live shows, I started developing all my touring live shows, and we were opening up malls all over the place. And so at that point, I had live shows doing malls, and I was doing cable television, and then I would scoot down and do something at Sesame Street, or I'd scoot down and do something at Henson's. But I was doing NBC. I was all over the place. I was no different than today. It wasn't different then. I was doing sports, too. I was doing stuff for the New York Giants. I was Westchester Film and Sports. I was their head cameraman for the New York Giants at that time. Just in training, just a training film. I'm not a sports fan, but I've been so wrapped up in sports for the last 40 years, and I'm still doing it today.
How do you do it as not a fan? Do you just dissect it?
It's television. I don't care what the subject is. I do. It's interesting because I do those commercials you see on TV where, for $19.99 you can buy these windshield wipers, or you. I have done those for years. I just finished one last week, and I have another one coming up. So a lot of times you see those things where, hey, the next one I'm doing is it's like Fix a Flat. It's a product, and they come to the studio, and I show them how to design this. We do flatten some tires and put it back up and light it and film it, and boom. Most people don't even know I do all those. Those commercials, I work with a lot of producers. They come to me and want me to figure out a different way for them to make their product look better. So I'm all over the place.
Well, frequently artists will have what they consider the money gig and the gigs that they do for themselves. Are any of these just sort of the
they're all money gigs
to keep the lights on?
You see, the thing if you're going to be in television or film or production, even if you're an artist doing, puppetry. My studio, Bill Diamond Productions, was divided into two parts. We call our creative shop, which is the things that we build, but we build stuff for sets and set designs and things for many other people. The production side can be what we're producing or what we're producing for others, but also assisting other productions. So, back in the 90s, we used to do stuff for Caterpillar and, IBM and Xerox and all these big companies, and they were a lot of the cash cows of stuff. No different than what Jim did earlier on. Commercials, I used to do the IBM commercials. Remember the Charlie Chaplin commercials? Way back in the 90s, so I did all of those. Miller commercials where you saw the characters animated on the clothesline and they would come to life. So all those things we were involved with on many, many levels. So it was never just TV and film. It's TV, product, film, theater, television. We covered the blanket because in television, everything, and in film, and in any product, everything has a shelf life, and I knew that early on. Mm-hmm. So to me, you had to have lots of shelves. So when that shelf, you can't put anything more on it, you better go to that one. Mm-hmm. And that's what we do. We even do it today.
Do the more high-profile television gigs get you the commercial work?
A lot of times, it gets us a lot of the things. It puts us in a place where when I want to do a project, I have no problem because my background is so mixed in so many different areas. Mm-hmm. I knew a lot of producers and directors and stuff. They come to me, they call if I'm there. And I'll walk in one day and be a lighting director on the World Wrestling. And the next day I could cross the hall and light the Yankees. And then the next day I'd be doing a television commercial, and by the end of the week I could be, puppeteering something for a new TV show and then at a con. So it's always, it's very diversified. And we've created it that way.
Mm-hmm. Do you like that personally, the challenge that every day is something somewhat different?
Yeah, I do. I mean, people bring things to me all the time, whether it's even just art. I always say I go from fantasy to sports in a flash. And I can do that. No, and it's all TV. So one day, like I said, I could be producing a car commercial. Next day, I could be doing, something on stage. So it never changes. Never boring, or it's always changing, I should say.
Could you do one thing forever if you had to?
No, you're never going to get me long enough. No, it's not going to happen. And that was one of the things. But when there was a chance to work full time at Jim's, and an NBC and a couple of other places that really wanted me, and I turned it down because I really wasn't interested in working for someone. It was great to know all these people and work with them. Mm-hmm. And be around them, but I was not didn't want that foundation. I wanted my own, and that's what I've always had.
But when we spoke last night, you said having your own production company was always the goal, and that you didn't work for Jim Henson Productions. You worked for Jim Henson.
I worked for Jim, and that's always a lot of people were asking, well, you worked for, it was Jim Henson Productions. At that time, it was Henson Associates. It wasn't really Jim Henson Productions. That didn't come until Jim didn't change that name until he started doing the Disney deal. Mm-hmm. But Jim was just one. I would work with Sandbank Films. I would work with Henson. I was never, in one place very long.
And you said that Jim Henson was very supportive.
Oh, he was actually. He was very supportive about that because I think back then I didn't know. That I thought maybe that I should just ground it there. And he was very supportive over the fact that, you need to do your own thing. I guess he saw something in me that, made that happen.
Well, it seems like that's very much what he did himself.
Yeah, well, he was like, you don't want to be here. I said, I'll start in the mailroom maybe. What do you think? It was good enough for Barry Manilow. It could be good enough for me.
Now, what did you do with Henson that people would recognize? What can you point to that said, oh, that was me, or was it too many things?
There's too many things. See, there's an interesting story that Jim loved gadgets, and he loved all kinds of things, and the artists that he had, and there were puppet builders downstairs, which I got to know. Michael Frith, who was an incredible artist and great inspiration to me and Guy Gilchrist, because he was Guy's mentor. And, he ran the art department. And he's the guy who really gave Fraggle Rock its look. Mm-hmm. But Jim had what they called at that time half-inch editing systems were just coming into play. They were tape and smaller tapes. Mm-hmm. Everything was big and bulky and all this other stuff. So I guess he wanted somebody to know how to use this. He wanted somebody to play with that and know how to use it. He needed it for some dark crystal stuff. He needed some for, Fraggle Rock. And that's when Johnny said, well, Bill knows he's now around and he does editing. Let him do it. And that's really was I knew my way around puppets, but I did all the editing elements, and that went strictly to Jim. So I was more a second string editor for whatever internals needed to be going on. But I would come in for 2 weeks and then I would leave, and I would go off and do, and I'd come back for a few days and then leave. It was great to be around him, be around all of that, but I was still doing. I had my shows on cable at that time. I had my studio here and there, and Jim and I would meet. But I knew Jim through, he was John's dad. So
Right.
And Jane was always great. So I knew them from the other side of the table.
So he was somebody that you knew. I mean, there was at that point already probably, I don't know if you call it a legend around him, but he was somebody.
Oh, we knew who he was. There's no question. But what was my perspective, there were people that worked for him, and it was a different relationship.
Right.
I would be up at Johnny's and Saugerty's. We would be doing something, and his father would walk in and chime in. And we would have great discussions or whatever was going on. It never had to be just around. You would not have that relationship if you went to Henson's while he was upstairs, because that was the boss.
Right.
And it was different world.
Did you take away anything from that experience
I
that
took
you
a lot from it, and I think Jim gave me from being around him and many others, Mel and a whole bunch of other people, the gravity of letting you know how to work with your team and your crew and whatever, because it was more of a personal relationship. I mean, like when Labyrinth was going into production, Michael Motion was the guy who did the juggling balls for Labyrinth. And he also was an artist that worked with John Kahn. And at that point, that we did in the 80s, and Jim remembered it and said, could you guys grab some footage of Michael doing that? I think I want to use it for this film. And so we're the ones so my involvement with Labyrinth was something I did with John there. Or if John went off to do a Sweetums thing, or, we would just get hurled into it, but I could go do it one day and walk away the next and go do my thing, which was great. And Jim would look at what I was doing too. So
you mentioned Sweetums, and that I've always loved that character. Just one of my favorite lines that could be taken out of context very badly in the Muppet movie was he comes out after the Milton Berle scene and says, "Jack not named, Jack job."
Yeah.
I mean, there's these little moments from that always stick in my head. Each character has their little line. I don't know. Is it the same for you, or is it do you have moments that you treasure with certain characters and certain productions?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you're doing a character, you become that character. I mean, when I was doing Dr. Ock's Dinosaur Adventure, what I always liked was the fact that I could take that character and go, discover, this something in history, or I could go, and I had those passions, or if I wanted to do a show, that deal with amusement park just to ride the rides for the day, we'd bring the characters there and shoot them at, for Six Flags. So I always said every production we created was an adventure, no matter what we were doing. And that was always fun. If, I would always work something in. Let's do a character in a plane. Next thing I know, I'm doing this whole documentary, and I'm up in a plane doing a character. So it would just, lend itself. But, I would be out filming in Dakota in a helicopter, because I was the only puppeteer that was a Steadicam operator, because Garrett Brown, and I've been around some really great people in the early on. Garrett Brown was the guy who created the Steadicam, and he first did it in Rocky, and then he won which he got an Oscar for, and then The Shining, and I learned from him. So I was well versed in this technology, so I would go off and do that. Now it's commonplace, but back then, being a Steadicam operator was a very rare thing, and I liked it because it was something new and unique, and was breaking the boundaries of film.
What year was that?
This was this was the 80s. So
remember the Halloween was noted for using Steadicam.
Yeah, but that was after the Shining. That's what broke the mold.
Right.
Shining. That whole scene at the end was all Steadicam work.
Right. Yeah,
So.
it's things that we don't think about, the technology that influences what we see. When you look at a film like The Shining, and you, as sort of a layperson watching it, saying, "Well, I know this looks different, but I don't know
why." Yeah. I mean, back then you got to kind of think about movie studios were changing. The whole industry was changed because it was more corporate. It was not the old Hollywood studio system was different. It was broken at that point. And this new group of what we call monster kids from the 60s were coming up. And in that group of that age bracket were people like Greg Nicotero, the director of Walking Dead, Rick Baker, Steve Johnson from The Abyss. You had Stan Winston, and then Jim was a little ahead of them all. Matter of fact, Stan Winston was a makeup artist who did makeup on many, many films until he saw Dark Crystal. And then Dark Crystal changed him, and he said, I could do that with puppetry. And then you had Terminator and Aliens and Jurassic Park. And again, there's an influence from Jim to another great person is Stan Winston, who I work with Matt Winston on their school. So we were all those young guys that had this industry, and television was more accessible to us, pretty much like the internet and the cameras are today. That's what it was then. And we were making Super 8 monster movies, and that was the thing. We call it the monster craze. And, I got hurled into it. I knew a man named Forey Ackerman who created the famous monster magazines, and he was the editor. At that time, I also was with the actor Peter Cushing and Basil Gogo. So I was hurled into this role, which our greats now were guys that were just paving the way, trailblazers. So I was that East Coast guy who had a studio while everybody was on the West Coast creating studios. And so those are the things that people are, it's the timing of what was going on in the industry at that time. It was an amazing era because we were breaking boundaries all over the place.
Well, as an independent studio, you must have had to work very hard to keep up with technology that was probably easier for major studios to afford.
Well, it's no different now, but yes, it was. The industry, the equipment changed so drastically. I mean, everything, when I was doing editing, was analog. And then it moved over, and then my son took over the computer side. But, what didn't change for me is if I was directing or lighting a stage show. Because at that same time, I was also on stage doing Little Shop of Horrors. So the 80s was an explosion of different industries that I just grabbed whatever I wanted to grab at that point and straight into the 90s.
I was going to ask you what a producer does, because I think it's sort of an amorphous term that people don't necessarily, what a director does, what an actor does. But it seems like from hearing you describe everything you've done, your job title is pretty much problem solver.
Well, yes, a producer. See, producers, the title of it now is kind of watered down. Everybody today with a cell phone thinks they're a director or a producer. So it's watered down. An executive producer, say 30 years ago, was the guy who really kind of put the finance together to make the project happen. And then you had the producer who made sure that everything was happening once the finances had, so the director could do his job. Those titles really haven't changed. They've just got watered down. And the thing is, then you had a very fine line who was an executive producer, or a director. Now, a producer could be a 17-year-old kid that's doing what they call the producer in a sports show. He's a producer, okay? It's not the same in the film business. So it's been watered down greatly over the years.
In getting back to the problem-solving part of it as well, it seems like a lot of that happens. If you watch any documentary on especially horror movies, a lot of that problem-solving seems to happen on that day of the set. Like, we need this to happen. We kind of had an idea of how we wanted to do it. We've got half an hour to shoot this scene.
It's no different. That's
You
what.
can do it.
And that's one of the reasons that I told you about those commercials, that they have to flatten a tire or make it snow. I just did a windshield wiper commercial, and they wanted to know how we can make it rain, so I brought the fire department in. And I shot the water over the cars, and it was a sunny day down in Sleepy Hollow. You know, I get that. That is our job, is problem solving. That's why I always tell everybody the word production is exactly that. It's a production. There's, you know, it's no different than putting a con together. It's a production. You have to constantly make everything work. It's changing, and that's the thing I live off. I really like. So if there's a problem come up, I'm right there, because it's not a problem. It's to solve it. It's to correct it. It's to make it happen. Yeah. Again, this commercial we have to do next week is the producer's like, well, if we bring a car into your studio, how do we make the tires flat? Now, that's what I have to then. Okay, we do this.
When they take it for granted that you can do that.
Been known to do it for years, so there's many things that we've, you know, changed the direction to how to make something look. You know, so you know, I have commercials that are on TV nationally you wouldn't even know I was even a part of. That just, you know, whether I lit it or cinemagraphically shot it, or they just come, and we're those guys. We call them. We're pretty much the MacGyver of television. It's pretty much what we do every day. Even when we do a con, we get a room and somebody says, here it is, and my crew turns around and says, okay, we're going to put Sally, we're going to put Audrey, we're going to do this. We flip it around to say, how does this room going to work for us and for the people to come and see it? So everything is logistically that, and we love it. And that's what it is.
You're the one who knows how to put all of the parts.
That's what they come to me for, is to
Sit
make it
together.
all. If somebody has a problem, or companies, Caterpillar had come to me many a time. How do I reach this audience? You know, how do I get a new market here? I did stuff for IBM in Brazil. How do we do that? We would use puppetry to break those molds and find better ways of making those products happen. Or somebody says, you know, I want to do this book, or I want to do this, and that's what we do. That's the creative process, you know, of it all.
When did you get involved with Little Shop of Horrors, the live production?
1984.
Was that the? Had it been running already?
It was off Broadway, and it closed. And then what a regional theater, Westchester Broadway Theater, decided to pick up the rights right away. You know, a regional theater didn't have that opportunity. And at that point, there was nothing available because it was done. So they knew me, and they came to me, and they said, you know, can you solve this? And they knew I did puppets, so I built it, and then I learned the show, and then next thing it became a tour. So I thought it was a great challenge, great. I didn't know that still 40 some odd, 35, 37 years later, I'd still be climbing in and out of that plant. You know, I probably had the Guinness Book World Records of operating that thing.
You said you do it at least once a year, right?
I do it a couple of times a year. Yeah. That's my exercise program. Some people ask me, it's like, oh, do you go to the gym and work out? I said, no, you climb into a man-eating plant. If you want to lose weight, in 5 minutes doing that job, you will be able to lose weight and go have a good steak dinner when it's all over with.
Okay, cancel my gym membership. How much is it for an Audrey II?
Sure, there you go. Yeah, so.
Well, you got one in your room, a full-sized one that's been used on stage.
Right.
And I guess the idea is to make people in the audience forget there's somebody in there, or to make them not realize that. And that takes a lot of different skills as well.
Well, it does. It takes the idea of, you know, now it's different. When you're in that character or any other character, at that point you have to command the stage. And that's the lead. You know, so even though you have leading actors and actresses, you need to now take something that's inanimate and bring it alive. And that's what you need to do with it. And there's a lot of tricks to it. When we built that one, that was a 2007 version. I even made it bigger than it was originally staged to be, because no one could physically handle it. And so you know, and I'm like, well, I can, let's do it. You know, and I wanted it to do things, you know, because everyone comes to us, they've seen it on the movie. You know, the movie, it's not one person working it.
Right.
You know, what you see on stage is just me. It's not the magic of film. They get this shot and that shot and do this. So what you're familiar with now, my challenge after the movie came out was now I had to challenge the film because that's what people remember. Now they see this thing on stage and it's got to do what the movie has to do.
Did you see the movie and go, oh man, this is going to make things...
because I kind of pretty much led the groundwork. I've always pushed the characters to do so much more.
You have to act in that thing, and can you see the other actors?
Well, I can't see them. I can hear them. I do everything by hearing. My notes are in the orchestra, and I can do everything I can't see them. Mm-hmm. The only time we had a problem with that was when I did a theater. I did it in Vegas, and the theater was a thrust stage at that point, and everyone was coming from different directions. So we actually built a bank of monitors at the base of the plant so that I could actually see where people were coming from. So I pretty much could switch from, and this is, again, not all this small stuff we have now. This was a number of years ago, so you had monitors based in the bottom of the plant. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you teach people how to use these, right?
What we do is we have a version that was originally the original plant that I did in the 80s. We she was a little smaller. That one's 200 pounds to lift in the air and manipulate. The other one's 96 pounds.
Wait, that's 200 pounds on you when you get in?
200 pounds, not counting the actors that I have to take in and eat during the production. Because I bring the actors in, and then I have to lift the plant straight up into the air, and they have to slide down and go out. So I'm lifting them for a reasonable amount of time.
Just to get into the...
Yeah, as they come in, I bring the plant in, otherwise they'd never get out of the plant. So the plant has to go up over them in order to get them out of it.
Mm. And you've got more than one plant because it grows, right?
Well, yeah, there's 4 plants in the show. There's the first one. The second one is done by Seymour, which is a puppet plant. And then I'm in the third one for most of the show. And then the last half part of the show, I'm in the big one.
How do you know you've done well after a performance like that, where you're inside a puppet and you're
well, because I jump out at the end. Hopefully they're standing up at that point applauding. So that's what happens. So I guess I do well because I did one show when they did the revival, and Liza Minnelli would always come and see me. So she's like, "Oh, I want to see Billy. Where is he?" So she would come backstage. So I guess I was doing okay. No, she was just a fan.
That's a bizarre picture.
Well, actually, her good friend was Terry White, a great singer, was my voice.
Oh, that's the other thing.
So I have to do it in lip sync, in by hearing everything that Terry would throw at me and the orchestra, and make that plant react in lip sync.
Right.
But we also teach the kids to do that, and then I usually turn around and they're like, "Well, how did I do?" I said, "It's going to look good for my house. I won't be here tomorrow when you have to do
it." That's got to be daunting. So, what goes into developing and rendering of a character?
Well, I mean, as far as we do is, if we're designing and writing a character, we want to know its environment. We want to know what its surroundings are. Looks are just one small part of that. At that point, we already pretty much know who's going to play that character. And we match that puppeteer to that, and we know that voice, we match that puppeteer. So I have a core of puppeteers and a core of production people. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they get to switch over, but I let them to be well-rounded in any direction that's possible.
Mm-hmm. And you do live events. What happens at a live...
Well, we do live events. We toured with Dr. Rock for many years. State and county fairs all around the country, but I had 4 of those shows at one time. And they were flying, and we'd fly in, and I'd puppeteer that one and fly out, and then I'd have to come back and do Little Shop. Or I know when I was doing Little Shop on stage, I was producing for Caterpillar, so they used to have a private plane for me, a jet at Westchester Airport. So I would come off stage doing Little Shop, and they'd fly me to Peoria, Illinois, do these production meetings, and fly me back in time for curtain for Little Shop of Horrors.
And you're not even on the bill, and you're getting the private plane.
Yeah, well, that's because Caterpillar. I was working for Caterpillar. I had nothing to do with Little Shop.
You have such wonderful things in that room. I want to address a couple of them. First, you showed me a photo book yesterday, and it looked like you had a David Letterman puppet, a giant David Letterman puppet. What was that?
Well, that was for Xerox. Letterman did a number of things for Xerox, and then he was like, well, whatever the situation was, he was doing a number of other projects, and they still wanted to do it. So somebody said, well, build a puppet out, and we did, and he got the biggest kick out of it. So, and so we did a David Letterman puppet for Xerox for David Letterman. So,
and you have a Vincent Price puppet in there as well.
I have a Boris Karloff, a Vincent Price. I work with all the families: Karloff, Cheney, Lugosi, Price, what I said when I made it to Hollywood, I was there many times, but I did a con. It was me, Sarah Karloff, which is Boris Karloff's daughter, Victoria Price, which is Vincent's daughter, Bela Lugosi, which is Bela Jr., Bela's son, and then Ron Cheney's the grandson. So we've been friends for many years. But when I saw it on the billing, where it's Karloff, Cheney, Lugosi, Price, Diamond, I was stuck in the middle. It was like the old Hollywood movies where you have John Carradine, Boris Karloff, and then it's just nice to see my name in that lineup. It was fun. But when I created Monster TV, one of the goals was to bring a new generation to all those classic movie actors. And so knowing Sarah and Bela and Victoria, that was our mission. So we now are doing a whole series of pieces that Vincent narrated. Mm-hmm. So I built the puppet. It's great to play Vincent Price with his real voice. It's a lot of fun. And Victoria does all the cameos, just like Sarah does.
Right.
But with the Boris Karloff puppet, that's not a narration. I'm really doing Boris's voice, where Vincent's is very difficult,
And Boris, if you watch the documentaries on those original monster movies, the stuff Boris Karloff had to go through for Frankenstein and the Mummy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jack Pierce. Again, that's that fun time that I've got to know all these people in the industry and the makeup artists that are there, and I've even done makeup for many films myself. So I did the makeup for Phantom and created the mask for Phantom on the Maury Eston and Koppel Phantom on stage. Mm. So I created all that. And so it's always great to be able to go do that. But I really have a passion for the old classics. I did the documentary Phantom Unmasked with Corlett Hull. Mm. And that was the whole history of Phantom. And we spent a long time at Universal and on the stage where Cheney originally did Phantom.
Mm. And that makeup still holds up.
Yeah, the makeup holds up. Unfortunately, that stage is gone now. It was, But the last documentary that I shot, it's the last time it was used in a movie. Because it was also used in the last Muppet movie, too. Yeah. Actually, when I was there shooting Phantom, the Muppets were there shooting their Muppet movie. So I was on stage doing Phantom while Kermit was doing his thing. So seems like I can never get away from them being in the same room as me. So.
Mel Brooks actually got some of that old stuff from the set. Some of the stuff you see in Young Frankenstein is stuff that was on the original Frankenstein sets.
Right.
It was just in a room somewhere. No one wanted it. He gave somebody I think he said $5 for all that stuff.
No, I think that's a little false. The guy who created the equipment, he was quite an electrician, and his name is right on the tip of my tongue, and I can't remember his name.
I can't think of it either.
But he was hired he had it in his garage.
Yeah.
And Mel brought him there. And matter of fact, I knew Gene Wilder, and Gene would tell me that they were all thrilled to just see this stuff work.
Yeah.
So it was really pretty wild to see that stuff. Fritz Landon, I think that's his name.
Yeah, that sounds right. I think Fritz is.
Yeah, and he created all that. For over the last number of years, we've done many cataloging of interviews to the Universal Monsters and all that world. I'm very involved with it. I still am today. So a lot of those people that everyone gets to know, I've known over the years. So and I've done them in documentaries, like I'm doing Basil Gogos now. So
yeah, I was going to mention that. Where is that?
It's in production, and I have everybody in it. I mean, I have 70 different people. Basil was, again, somebody who I've known for 45 years. You may not know his artwork, but if you saw it, you would. You're here at a Comic-Con, and his artwork is very apparent. Every artist that's here was infected by what Basil did.
Does anybody here know the name? Fans of Basil's?
Kind of like Frank Frazetta.
Same time, a little bit before Frazetta. Basil was an artist who was a very fine art. He turned the monsters into fine art. He turned them the first time people would see, which was a Boris Karloff painting that Basil did for Famous Monsters 1960, and that it was in color. No one had seen, any of the Universal monsters in color. So the color you see now, the things that are depicted, are really the bold colors that Basil used. And Basil sparked people like Greg Nicotero, Tom Savini, Rick Baker in the makeup world. And they're all in part of the documentary. Tim Burton, Peter Jackson, again, all in my documentary. Countless artists and whatever. Basil was that artist that made monsters cool. You see it here, but he's the one that did it first.
If you've seen there's a traveling exhibit of Kirk Hammett's personal horror collection.
And Kirk's in the documentary too.
Yeah, there's a bunch of his stuff in that. It was just at the Peabody Essex Museum last year. Now I think it's up somewhere else. I think maybe in Oregon. Somebody you have to check online.
Kirk owns a number of original pieces. So does director Del Toro. And a number of other people. He's painted for Rob Zombie's covers. He's done, Metallica. He's done many. The list goes on. And I have all the families involved. And like I said, I've been friends with Basil from the beginning. And again, I'm able to do this. When we lost him a year and a half ago, about a year ago, and I would always be at a show with Basil. I felt, and so did his widow, that I was the person because I knew him so well. Mm-hmm. And so all these people have come out of the woodwork that you will all know their names. Tim Burton, many people that have been influenced by him. Mm-hmm. So that's another great, just like we did the Phantom documentary and the Aurora documentary. Mm-hmm. I like doing those because we have a fun way of using puppetry to bring it alive. And I'm using puppetry, I'm building Basil as a character because he loved the puppets when he would come and see me. So we thought we would make him into a character so that we could tell his backstory.
Do you have any, is there a recording of his voice from anything you could use?
We're going to use it strictly as there'll be narration over it, okay. And then people's story. Rick had already done his piece, and Tom Savini has done his, and Victoria. And so they're all filming now, and it'll come out in 2020.
And you've got some of his stuff in that room
yes,
as well.
And the prints that we have in there, anything that we sell that is of Basil is strictly to raise the funds for the documentary. Mm-hmm. So whoever buys those, that's where the money's going.
Where does all that stuff live? You've got the Audrey II, you've got a Skeksis in the corner, which ambushed me a little bit because you can't see it when you walk in. So you turn around, you've got a giant Sully from Monsters, Inc.
Yeah, I have 10 acres on the Hudson. We have 90,000 feet of production space. Mm. And so puppet shops, scenic shops, storage is there. Everything is there that we need.
Is there anything open to the public that people could come see?
We're gearing up for that to happen, but at this point, it's all by invitation.
Mm. And the other thing that you have...
That's why we take it here.
The other thing you have in that room are the Moonshins that are going to be used or are currently
They're in production now. Yeah, they, again, go back. I did Mass Comic Strip, then a live show.
When
with
was
Malls.
What date was what year was the
comic strip? Was 1979 to probably 1983. Mm-hmm. And then we put it out as a live show in around 81 and on, and toured. And malls were just opening up, so we toured the show. So it would be, at a mall, it would be almost like a convention now. You'd see me, Desi Arnaz Jr., Ricky Schroeder, all these guys, and we would all wind up doing this stuff live. And they would see the Moonshins. So the Moonshins then led into when we did Dr. Rock's Dinosaur Adventure. It was on TV at the same time we were touring live. So we did that, and that's where I trained a lot of my puppeteers.
Do you want to mention what is a Moonshin?
Well, a Moonshin is a creature that lives on the moon. Most of the first episode we did is that people didn't know they were really out there. And so even though we visited the moon, they weren't able to be seen. So we always feel that there's always something else out there. And what we did was create it. And basically the Moonshins are very attracted to the Earth, like we are attracted to the moon. And since it's hand in hand, their world kind of gets referred into things that they've heard. Now, back then, we used their antennas to pick up radio waves and messages and things like that, and they would talk about these things. You know, the first one was they were going to be invaded and what was going to happen to them. You know, man landed on the moon, you know, all of a sudden they have visitors and they don't know what to do with it. You know, and Snacks basically turns around and says, great. You know, now what are we going to do? We got a bunch of aliens coming in and, you know, they stick up a flag. What do they think? This is a golf course? You know. So,
and this is going to be, this is targeted for Amazon Prime for next year?
Yes, it's targeted for Amazon and the internet. The first episode, which is Garth finds out the Earth is flat, and he doesn't know how to handle that.
And do you have a rough date?
No, it's in production now. You know, I've been wrapping it around. It's been the sets and everything are there, and we shoot it, but we're also doing Petland at the same time. We're doing Tiny Teddy at the same time, and these commercials keep popping up and many things. So we kind of always been shooting that around it. But now that December and January, we're slated to finish the project.
What there's so much that you're doing, it's hard to keep track of it. What else?
Come to my office sometimes, a whole wall listed of stuff.
Well, is there anything I've missed that you want to tell people that's out or coming out or you're working on? You've got some Kickstarters and things too.
Yeah,
right?
well, we had the Ghost project. We are doing a whole bunch of stuff with Gorgo and the Vincent Price with Victoria. Where we're doing, Vincent did a whole series of haunted tales. So we've got a lot of his original recordings, and so I'm wrapping storylines around it to be able to go straight with Vincent Price narrating, and Victoria's loving it. We still do stuff for Monster TV. We have a part 2 to Aurora Monsters that we've shot most of it, working on that, and still do some stuff for the Stan Winston Company, teaching, you know, puppetry or whatever else is needed. We did Shrek this year, so we built all the characters for the dragon for Shrek. We haven't brought that to a
for
con
Shrek,
yet.
a live Shrek show.
Yeah, live Shrek show. Things keep on popping up. You know, yesterday I found these 2 guys to do this great comic book. Next thing you know, who knows?
It happens that quickly. You
It
see
happens
something
that quickly. Most of the time over a beer.
And you have the freedom to do that because you have your own company. I can see this. I can do it.
Things come up, you know, and there's a lot of times that other people that are in the industry don't have the facility or the capability to do it. I'm always open to what they're trying to do. So a lot of times I'll help them figure that out. Whether we personally do it, there's one of my production artists, Tammy. She's the head of the art department. She's working on a series of Fairy Willow, a series of characters that I'm helping her with, since she works on Moonshins and everything else, and bringing those characters alive, as well as one of my other video photographers wants to do stop motion animation. So I've been helping him get his ideas across. So a lot of times, not only my inner crew being able to hit some of their passions, we're doing that, as well as constantly being booked up to bring these characters around and what we're doing to all the different Comic-Cons around the country. And that's my agent and John's job. They just move the show, you know, and then I pretty much show up.
And where can people go to keep track of all of this stuff, or try to? I won't say.
You can usually, I guess there's the Bill Diamond Facebook page, and then there's the, you know, the I would say there. See, those guys, I just tell them, they all kind of put it in there and put it out. So just go to Bill Diamond Productions. You know, I got Tammy and Glenn and Jude always working on it, and always things are being done and, you know, being developed there. But it's an ongoing process. There's all kinds of stuff that's happening.
Yeah, I can imagine tomorrow there'll be 12 new things.
Probably, I get a call from whether right now the Yankees aren't playing, so I don't have to do anything there. But the Nets are. So I'll be on the 8th of June, I'll be back in the studio, tweak some lighting, and be in doing that. So that happens quite a bit. So new projects come up. CBS just launched a new 24-hour network, and I came in for a day just to fix that up and get that going for them. So.
Well, thank you for taking time out to talk to me. I appreciate it.
Well, this is the fun part, for us to give us a chance to talk to the fans, but they get a chance to see all this stuff here, and that's what keeps it all alive.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I appreciate it.
Hair to the hair isn't always a trend.
Thanks again to Bill Diamond for sitting down to speak with me. You can find out more about what Bill's up to on the Bill Diamond Productions Facebook page and follow him on Twitter at BillDiamondPRD. Thanks also to the Northeast Comic-Con for having me out. You can see Bill there again March 15th through 17th, and also Muppet Babies artist Guy Gilchrist, who is featured on next week's episode along with new music from Ted Drozdowski. And you can see some photos of Bill's wonderful room at the con at the Department of Tangents blog at www.departmentoftangents.com. And if you liked this episode, please consider subscribing and or rating and reviewing on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts, and find us on Facebook and Twitter. And now the tuneful crunch and swagger of Teardrop City. I had a very hard time choosing which track to feature from the band's new album, It's Later Than You Think. Every track is a winner. It's headed by Tyler Keith, who I remember from Tyler Keith and the Preacher Kids' hard-rocking album Romeo Hood. Keith had left the Neckbones and recruited Blue Mountain to back him under the name Preacher's Kids. We're actually just a week from the album's 18th birthday, as it was released February 27th, 2001. That's relevant because two of the Preacher's Kids, Laurie Sturrock and George Sheldon, are Teardrop City members. The quartet is rounded out by drummer Wallace Lester. If you liked Romeo Hood, you can probably just bypass my spiel and go right to the song. You won't be disappointed. But if you don't know Keith or Blue Mountain, you're in for a treat. I'm playing the title track, It's Later Than You Think, a gloriously ragged tune with plenty of hooks. Sturrock and Keith trade vocals throughout the album, but this one is Keith's, and he's caught somewhere between Frank Black's spleen-letting and Mick Jagger's Cool. It's about what else? Love Gone Wrong. You can find out more about the band and the album on Facebook at Teardrop City Oxford MS or on Twitter at Teardrop_City. Pick it up. Here's Teardrop City. It's Later Than You Think.
It's later than you think, she said. You better get your house in order, my friend. I might just have to leave this place. I can make it better on my own. And I wish she'd come on back home. I was hoping it was not too late, she said. Get your house in order, my friend. It's later than you think. Well, she's gone on back to her mama's house. She's told everybody what's going on.